So welcome back once again to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay that's from the ongoing RP series, which is currently happening on the Discord. And this one, well, the last one that we saw was between the Dwarves of Erebor and the Elves of Linden on a river crossing battle. We're still presumably in the cold north here, but this is going to be between some forces from Umbar who have occupied this citadel and city here. And they are going to be besieged by 4 attacking Gondorian armies just outside the walls. Now, I'm told that the funds are actually relatively equal for this one, so this, from that point of view, would be quite difficult for the attackers, but the attackers also do outnumber the defenders by a single army, so I would imagine here, at least from what I was told from Sin, that the defenders have got, who sent me the battle replay incidentally, that the defenders have got significantly higher quality throughout their armies, but the attackers have got more numbers. So it'll be interesting to see how this works out, particularly seeing as this particular settlement, before we get into the army compositions, is pretty open. There's not really a lot of places to hide, so as soon as the defenders lose the walls, the attackers could really start to use that to their advantage, presumably, if that is indeed their plan. But there's not really a great deal of cover in here, other than in the keep back here, which I believe there is a small area, small little alcove back here, which could be used as a sort of a final stand, but you also need to keep in mind the town centre is very open, and this is just a sort of, I've seen this layout quite a few times before in both medieval and 3rd Age replays, so yeah. We'll go through, I think, the attacking armies first of all, actually. We've already seen this player over here, and I was a little bit concerned about what the frame rate would be on this one, so I have turned down the vegetation quality quite a lot, based on the fact that we won't really be seeing a lot of trees within the settlement anyway. So WK, first Gondorian army, obviously got some civilians out front just acting as the fodder. Obviously that is their primary purpose most times. There is obviously going to be some frame drops as the walls get brought down, and the Gondorians do have a trebuchet, which in a siege environment certainly is where it's at its most useful. You very, very rarely see them in a field battle because of how inaccurate they can be, but their extreme range can make them very useful in this sort of situation, whether that's for bringing down walls or when things get when things turn into a bit more of a serious blob fight, which is very likely to happen in the vast majority of sieges. A trebuchet hit is more devastating than a catapult hit, so from that point of view, WK is probably going to be hoping that he can bring down the walls and do some damage. Got several units of standard Gondor infantry here with both levels of armour upgrade. This should make them a pretty decent backbone to the Gondorian attacking forces here. He's got several units of them all spanning the width of his army, all of which are pushing a siege tower as well. Now, obviously they will lose 1-to-1 with the Castamir's Legion and the Abrazanim Nadu Tariq, I believe, because of the AP on the Abrazanim. However, they will beat the standard Corsair units, so obviously like the Corsair infantry, the Gondor infantry is of higher quality than those, so interesting sort of matchup that Gondor has with Umbar. And then back here we've also got some Ramus Ekor Garrison infantry. Very rare that you see these guys, to be honest with you. You're much more likely to see the archer variant because of how cost effective they can be. But obviously in this sort of situation with the RP you get sort of assigned certain funds and certain army compositions that you can use. So even units like this can prove to be very useful. And over here we can see in the middle of his army, obviously we've got the mighty Fountain Guard, some of which don't have their pole arms out at the moment. But obviously the Fountain Guard, the heart and soul of any Gondor infantry force, very, very strong. And even against Umbar, who are very strong in terms of infantry, the Fountain Guard can prove to be a real problem for them. And just over here we can see some Pelagia Marines. The Javelins could be very useful. Umbar, of course, in general, well armoured throughout. If the Javelins can get into a good position, they can rain some death down on the Umbar defences. Back here we do have some Ramus Ekor Garrison Archers. Obviously they're not going to win any prizes for being high damage, but their decent armour values and the fact they have a shield value for being a militia tier archer means they can be very, very good at soaking up pressure. Big fan of the Garrison Archers as they stand. Here in the middle we have WK's General, who is going to be in a Wardens of the White Tower unit. Very, very powerful sword and board units, one of the stronger sword and board units in the game as it stands. Again, this is all subject to change with 0.97 coming up, but I imagine the Wardens of the White Tower will maintain the bulk of their effectiveness, considering Gondor's focuses. We have the Axemen of Lasarnak with the first level of armour upgrade, obviously the primary AP unit in Gondor's roster other than the Fountain Guard. Obviously very much an attack-focused unit, and the AP should come in very handy against Umbar as well. So the subsequent Gondor armies we'll go through a little bit more quickly, just so that we can, because it's likely to be similar armies, if not the same. We've got some Gondor infantry over here without the armour upgrades this time. This is going to be played by Master Blaster, so he's got a couple of units of Gondor infantry out in front. He's also got some Gondor Spearmen without the armour upgrades. They could be used to push through lines. Obviously, we don't see any Orc factions here, which means mass pushes are going to be a little bit more dependent on units like Spearmen as their backbone. Some civilians, of course, again, just a measure to save money to bring these guys, and obviously you can see they're going to be pushing the gates towards... pushing the ram towards the gates, not pushing the gates. Some more Gondor infantry over here. He's got some Ramus Ekor Garrison Archers of his own, so again, going for the attrition focus with their skirmish line. And then a couple of units of civilians as well, and then I believe this will probably be the rest of his army. Indeed it is. He too has got some Axemen of the Sarnak. Again, these guys do not have the armour upgrade, unlike WK's army, but still their AP damage will be very useful against the Umbar defences, as will the Pelagia Marines with their javelins. He, however, does have some Guards of Osgiliath as well, and the pikes could be very, very handy indeed. Umbar, of course, could have invested in halberdiers of their own, and the Guards of Osgiliath with their pikes can outrange that sort of thing, so we shall see as the battle develops. Pikes in general can be very useful in a grindy fight anyway. Of course, he's got some Fountain Guard as well. What would a Gondor army be without it? And his general is also going to be a unit of Wardens of the White Tower here at the back, and I believe that's just about it, unless this is also part of his army. Indeed it is. He's got a couple of units of Citadel Guard, so saving money on the armour upgrades and having a few more lower tier units elsewhere in his army has allowed him to buy some of these. And the Citadel Guard, of course, has spears, but they are also AP spears, so they are a very, very strong unit. Definitely not to be underestimated by other elite infantry of a similar cost. He's got two... No, that's Kuro's army. So Master Blast has a trebuchet, but moving on to the third Gondorian army, we have Kuro, who is playing as Gondor. He's got some Ramus Ekor Garrison covering his own trebuchet, so there's going to be a bit of a bombardment phase here at the start as the Gondorians try to bring down and peel away some of the outer defences to Umbar, rob them of their advantage on the walls. Some Axemen of Sarnak pushing up this ram over here. It's very possible, of course, that there are stuff like Athelian Rangers and Wardens of Minas Ithil that I'm missing. Some Ramus Ekor Garrison Archers here also, so again, the primary measure it looks like they've saved money on is their skirmish force, but the Ramus Ekor Garrison Archers are good enough in their own right for the reasons that I've mentioned that I think this is just fine for Gondor. We've got some Citadel Guard from Kuro. We've also got some Wardens off the White Tower. It doesn't look like that's his general's unit, however. We have some Fountain Guard. We have a force of Axemen of the Sarnak here at the back. And we have some Nimlothian Honour Guard, the first one of these units that we've seen, essentially shielded Fountain Guard. Elisar's Vanguard as well, so a lot of elite forces actually from Gondor here. That's where the general's going to be, as well as the Coronated Aragorn. Obviously very, very good in a sustained fight. And then some Fountain Guard, and then the final Gondorian army over here, with this row of siege towers we can see is going to be played by Tundra's Fox. He too has got some civilians and a trebuchet. So 4 trebuchets in action today. The Umbar defence will definitely need to be careful of them. Some Ramus Ekor Garrison just in behind the siege towers. Some Ramus Ekor Garrison Archers as well. Axemen of the Sarnak, and then over here we have some Guards of Osgiliath. Very similar composition to Master Blaster, it looks like. He's got some Fountain Guard here at the back. Kerandros Swordmasters, that's the first one of this unit that we've seen. More standard human Swordmaster unit. You scarcely see Gondor bring them, purely because they tend to spend their money elsewhere, like on the Fountain Guard. But they are still a very effective unit, very similar to stuff like the Abrazani Narduzagar and units of a similar ilk. Swordmasters of Karnan as well. Pelagia Marines over here, some more civilians, and then at the back over here, I believe this is going to be... We have another unit of Kerandros Swordmasters actually, so now we shall get into the Umbar armies. And Umbar, of course, have got their work cut out because this is a pretty serious force that is coming at them from all angles, and the interior of the settlement is not hugely defensible. There are settlements in Medieval 2 which are much more defender-friendly than this one, so we'll see how Umbar can get on. We've got some Castamir's Rangers up here on the wall, displayed by Eclipse 2500 of the Dark Cloud. Obviously Rangers are going to be very, very useful in this sort of fight for dealing with blobbing Gondorian forces. We have some Belagir Halberds as well. Obviously the Halberds also going to be very useful. The vast majority of Gondor's forces are heavily armoured, although Umbar's forces are as well, and the AP will obviously be extremely useful there. We have some Abrazani Narduzagar, as I just said, human Swordmaster unit. We'll go one-to-one with the Kerandros Swordmasters, although the Kerandros Swordmasters will probably win because of their heightened armour values. Castamir's Legion obviously going to be the backbone of the Umbar defence here. They will outclass the Gondor infantry. They will struggle against stuff like the Fountain Guard, however, so composition here is going to be key. Some Naru Na'aru Sentinels, obviously a fantastic pike unit this. We've seen them be so effective a few times before at this point. More Castamir's Legion from Eclipse 2500, as well as some Belagir Halberds. Anything else up on the walls? Indeed, we can see the Naru Na'aru Royal Guard, which is actually going to be Eclipse's general, front and centre, so he needs to be careful that he doesn't immediately get focused down by all the trebuchets. We shall see if he does. Over here we can see some Abrazani Nadu Barweep as well, so the skirmish fight is likely, between the two archers, is likely to be extremely grindy. I would imagine there's probably a couple of Athelian rangers at the very least from Gondor. Obviously Umbar have got their own rangers, so when they deploy the rangers is likely to be when the vast majority of the range damage comes in, and obviously the javelins when things get up into close quarters. Abrazani Nadu Tariq and Corsair Savages with their AP, as well as some Castamir's Legion. Here we can see Engsvitz's army is beginning. He's also got some Corsair Pikemen. I've seen the Corsair Pikemen so many times be really cost effective for Umbar, in spite of the fact they are low tier pikes and they're really terrible under arrow fire. Generally speaking, in melee they can hold their own pretty well, and it just goes to show the value of cheap pikemen. Balagai Archers obviously good in the skirmish fight. Balagai Footmen, likely just here for their mass. Their killing power in melee against other infantry is very limited. More Corsair Pikemen from Hanks. Some Naruna Aru Royal Guard, which again is going to be where our Pharazon is going to be. Good range attack obviously, and then the fact they double as multiple HP spears in melee. Some Castamir's Legion down here. Let's see what's happening over here at the gate. Some Naruna Aru Sentinels. Actually this is cannon fodder, so there are 4 armies on the defence. I'm completely wrong. It's a little bit difficult to tell when all the armies are shifting around, but I only counted 3 names previously. I missed cannon fodder's army entirely, so it's a 4v4. With equal funds. So actually the defender's probably in a pretty decent spot at this point. The attacking armies do still have a lot of elites, but the settlement could still work in favour of the attackers. Castamir's Rangers up here on the wall as well. Some Corsair Savages as well as some Balagai Footmen. Some Balagai Halberds as well, obviously, just going in there with the AP and the mass, as well as some Corsair Pikes over here. You can see where Umbar have had to cut a few corners as well. There's quite a few Balagai and Corsair units. Obviously not as expensive as the Castamirs and the Abrazanim units, more Savages though. The AP will still be very handy, however, as well as the Balagai Halberds up here on this wall. As we go backwards, we'll start to get into Sin's army. I think we can see some crossbow Corsairs and some Corsair Archers up here on the walls. But yes, we can see Sin. Obviously we've got some Blackguard, some crossbow Corsairs over here from Eclipse, some Narduzagar from Eclipse, so all the armies are very much mixed together. We do have a piece of artillery for Umbar, a catapult within the settlement, which means when the trebuchets try to come in to take advantage of the blob fights, the catapult could snipe them out, which is going to be its primary function here, with 4 trebuchets arrayed against them. Another unit of Naruna Aru Royal Guard, crossbow Corsairs, Castamir's Legion and Corsair Pikemen in a big blob, more Corsair Archers, some crossbow Corsairs, more ranged units in the shape of crossbows and archers. So Umbar have got a lot of ranged forces here actually. We'll see if Gondor can withstand all that pressure. And then back here, just in reserve, we've got some Naruna Aru Sentinels, some Blackguard, and some Harbingers, which again, I've always been a little bit underwhelmed by Harbingers in the last few patches, but they are still a very difficult unit to bring down in a blob fight, and towards the end of the fight, if they're still in perfect condition, they could be the difference maker. However, I did notice that this unit of Corsair Archers over here was already firing, so let us begin. It's not an overly long fight this, particularly considering that the deployment phase was relatively long, because of course people want to be careful in an RP series, because it's not just a one and done battle, you have to live with the consequences of all the losses that you've suffered afterwards. So efficiency is going to be on the minds of the players here as the armies battle it out. Corsair Archers firing on the civilians, not really worth their time, although Umbar do have a lot of skirmishers. So here we can see, oh hello, one of the trebuchets is immediately just firing over the wall, not concerned with making holes in the walls first. There's another artillery piece over here from cannon fodder, but there are a lot of Umbar blobs over here, which, again, a nice hit from the trebuchet. When they hit, they cause a lot of damage. Very wide area of effect their projectiles have, but obviously while the walls are going down, as I said, the frame rate will suffer a little bit, but that will only be for the initial portion of the fight, and it looks as though the attackers are playing it safer as well. A few hits there, some Castamir's Rangers falling, as well as some crossbow Corsairs, though not terrible for the defenders. These ranged units will still have their effectiveness. They need to be hit multiple times before they got noticeably effective, especially the crossbows, to be honest.
The enemy are through the walls.
One area of the wall goes down. WK, of course, has got instant access to the town centre over here, although he will also be charging into a lot of elite units, to be honest with you. If I was WK, I'd probably be the most cautious of the attackers. I'd wait for the other 3 attacking armies to make some inroads elsewhere in the settlement before putting pressure on the TC, because you really don't want to lose one of your armies early by just charging them into the strongest point of the defence. But as I said, it's very likely that the attackers are going to take this slow, because if they charge in, they're going to take a lot of losses. And as this is an RP series, they want to keep their armies as healthy as they possibly can. The classic enemies, Gondor and Umbar, and they actually have a very similar way of doing battle. In fact, you can see that these arrow towers are also being taken down by the attacking siege equipment, trying to deprive the defenders of any advantage. But this is, of course, expending a lot of the ammunition from the attacking artillery. So the defenders will probably accept this. They certainly have the range firepower to do without the arrow towers for the most part, as more bombardments come in. Yes, as I was saying, Umbar and Gondor, similar in the way they go about things. A little bit more attrition focused, defensive. They've got a lot of units which can absorb a lot of pressure. Umbar a little bit more so, maybe have got units which can attack more easily.
The enemy are through the walls. Fight on! The enemy must get no further.
They've got a little bit of the Orc about them after all, where they've got some lower tier units, which are great in number, which can be committed without too much concern. And they do have those on display today, stuff like the Corsair Savages and the Corsair Pikemen. Gondor, by contrast, a little bit more focused around higher quality in general. The average quality of a Gondorian infantry line is probably going to be higher than Umbar's. The Castamir's Legion are obviously better than the Gondor infantry, but it's the other bits and pieces that go with it, stuff like the Fountain Guard and the Care Andor Swordmasters, particularly with the compositions on show today. I'd be interested to see how this goes, whether or not having the disparity between some lower tier units like the Corsairs and then the higher tier units like the Castamir's Legion will see Umbar through, or whether a more average feeling of quality across the whole line will work in Gondor's favour. We'll see. Several of these buildings, you can see this one's already taken a bit of a beating from the trebuchet fire coming from Master Blaster and Guro-Jan's trebuchet, but over here we can see that Tundra's Fox is moving up with some intent. Might be trying to enter the settlement already. That tower has not been fully destroyed yet, however.
The enemy have ladders at the walls. Repel the attackers. Give them steel.
More bombardment. Trebuchet, of course, if it lands a few good hits, that could be nasty. This wall's actually taking some damage, not by design, but just from the fact that the trebuchets on the other side of the settlement are overshooting their targets. And you can see now the arrows are starting to flow into the settlement as well. Not particularly accurate though. I'm not sure if I would be using my archers at this point. The amount of damage you can do like this is very, very limited, to be honest with you. They are blobbed, so more of these arrows will hit, but you're not really getting much in the way of kills here. I think you'd be much better served waiting until you claimed the walls and then putting all your Ramasek or Garrison Archers up there to rain some death down into the settlement. That would be much more the way to go, in my opinion, but we shall see. Umbar, after all, do have a lot of skirmishes that they could use to answer that. The Corsair Archers, in particular, at the moment, are already firing as the civilians make their way forward. We can see that some Ramasek or Garrison pushing some ladders. And over here, we can see that Tundra's Fox is getting some civilians up here. So this little alcove, where Sid was keeping some of his reserve units, it looks like that's going to be a bit of a jumping off point for the attackers here.
The enemy are
Another wall goes down.
Fight on! The enemy must get no further.
Although, in order to take this little area over here, they'll need more than civilians and Ramasek or Garrison infantry. Because Sin has got his elites back here, and the Harbingers and Naran Iris Sentinels will carve through militia all day long. Oof. All of this artillery action, the game is struggling to keep up with all of this. You can see the tower, though, that hasn't fallen, still firing. Slowly but surely eating into the manpower of these Ramasek or Garrison Archers, and the tower won't stop firing until it's captured either. I don't believe he's out of ammunition on his trebuchet just yet, so it might be worth his while just destroying this tower. It'd only take one more hit after all. And he went to the trouble of destroying these two. More arrows coming in. More walls presumably are being brought down as well, more towers. The falling frame rate, although based on the length of this battle I don't believe the attackers will be too cautious for too long. I imagine at some point they are going to sort of go all in and then everything will happen all at once. Oh, hello. Here we can see that there is bit of a sally out here from Eclipse 2500. That's bold. Cannon fodder and Eclipse. Moving in tandem with Belagai Halberds, Corsair Savages, Castamir's Legion. I mean, these are good units that have been committed. As well as Eclipse's General, his Naruna Aru Royal Guard. These are 2 trebuchets here which the attackers could lose. I mean, the problem that they do have is there are quite plentiful units of Citadel Guard over here. With their AP and with their defensive values, they are a match for the Castamir's Legion as well. You can see there the trebuchet crew trying to run away. So the trebuchet crews, I imagine, are just going to bug out and wait for support to arrive, and then they can be reclaimed later. Bold moves, though, by Umbar. Certainly. What's going on over here? Ramazak Garrison Archers on the way over, and again, this is the problem with these compositions when you go into a siege. If you don't bring any cavalry at all, you lack the ability to respond rapidly to something like this. And this is a good force that Umbar have committed out here. Now, this could work against them in the end, because this is the sort of force which could be surrounded and overwhelmed, but I don't think any reinforcements are close enough to really reinforce and take full advantage of this from a Gondorian perspective. Hopefully the frame rate will stabilise as soon as everyone is done with the bombardment phase. Here we can see the Corsair Savages. Defeat is almost a certainty. Obviously their low skill not helping them in this situation, but their numbers will. More Gondorians on the way, but it's only civilians and standard infantry and spearmen. And the Umbar forces committed a lot of elites out here. Naruna Aru, Castamir's Legion, Abrazani. All good units. Here's the Ramazak Garrison Archers shooting point blank into Narduzagar as they charge forwards. But they will be engaged as well, although the Narduzagar are quite thinly spread at this point in time, and they will be just overwhelmed here. But if they can buy time for the rest of their forces to do their grisly work, we shall see. I think it's time we actually went down a speed here. I can't believe I missed this initially. But a very bold sally out, I like it. Umbar taking advantage of their quality. And their numbers from the Corsairs. Now it looks as though Gondor are going to try and penetrate the settlement. Which they need to do now, honestly, because Umbar have committed forward a lot of resources outside the walls. Now I think would probably be the time to try and mount some form of assault. Although that is easier said than done with some of these units, in particular stuff like the civilians. You can see that arrow fire is still being traded back and forth, but again it's over the walls, so really it's just sort of taking pot shots at one another. When you're firing in such an arc, it doesn't really do a huge amount of damage. But let's see what's going on out here. Naruna Aru Royal Guard. You can see now the Citadel Guard proving their strength in a big way. The AP really helping out against the Castamir's Legion and the Umbar forces in general. And this is where the fight could start to turn around. It is a bold move, but I think Umbar at this point have probably had enough and are probably going to try and leave with what they can. I would say that Gondor have probably had the better of this fight, to be honest with you. Umbar have only really managed to rout off a couple of lower teams. They've got some kills, yes, but they committed a lot of good units forward for this, and ultimately I don't think it's worked out quite as well as they were hoping, because the trebuchet crew can just remount their artillery pieces when all is said and done. If they had killed one or both of the trebuchets, that would be a different matter. But as is, the Umbar forces are desperately trying to run back to the city. You can see some Ramazak Garrison Archers in hot pursuit of Eclipse's General. Some Castamir's Legion over here as well. The Pelagia Marines have actually blocked the Corsair Savages. They get a point blank hit here on the Naruna Aru Royal Guard. The snow textures, honestly, you know, I know people are going to say the same thing again. Yeah, the weather effects I'm not a fan of, but for 0.97 they're being tweaked or removed depending on what is possible to do with them. So they will be fixed in 0.97, but for the time being we're just going to have to grin and bear it. The Naruna Aru Royal Guard will be able to get out of here, you would imagine, but the longer these Pelagia Marines hold them up, the more likely it is reinforcements will come, and the Citadel Guard are on the way. That's not good news for Umbar at all. Support is coming from the walls, the Abrazani Nadubawi shooting down upon the Gondorians. What's going on over here? Seeing a fight up on the walls now as well. We can see the Belagai footmen attacking the Ramazak or Garrison Archers. I'm very surprised that Kuro sent his archers up onto the wall first, because there were infantry units that were readily going to be able to engage, and the Ramazak or Garrison Archers, while they may be durable in a skirmish fight, in a melee fight they are still militia archers ultimately, and even a unit of basic spears like this will have little trouble cutting their way through them. The trebuchets at this point have remounted. The frame rate once again is going to soil itself now that we've got some building destruction going on. What is going on here? Still a very tentative front over here between WK and the forces over here, but there's very little he can do. There's so much there's a real concentration of elite forces for Umbar over here. It's the main point of their strength, the town centre. So WK is going to probably just have to wait until events happen elsewhere on the field. Meanwhile, over here is where the main action is still going on. The civilians are fighting against the Corsair savages, and the savages unfortunately have taken such a beating at this point that the numbers of the civilians is going to be enough to see them through. So another unit of Corsair savages has been lost. Also at this point, the Castamir's Legion are going to try and get back into the city, but they are not going to be allowed to. Tundra's Foxes, Nimlothian Honor Guard blocking the way, and now they're going to be sandwiched between them and the Citadel Guard, both AP units. Again, I can't praise the Castamir's Legion enough, but in this situation they are thoroughly outclassed. A few of them might get away, but that's grisly. So Gondor, I don't think they were expecting such an aggressive sally out from Umbar, but ultimately they reacted well enough, and Umbar have ultimately borne the brunt of this engagement so far. They certainly lost more important units than Gondor did. Unless I missed something spectacularly obvious. Meanwhile, and as I said over here, you can see the Balagai footmen having really very little issue, slowly but surely poking and prodding their way through the Ramazak or Garrison Archers. You can see that there are some Axemen of Lasarnak over here as well, and they will have significantly more luck against the Balagai footmen. Their AP damage, high attack values in general, will certainly help, although this isn't really the best of engagements for them. They will still struggle a little bit. Their defensive values are not great after all, so they will take losses of their own. Meanwhile, looks as though we're about to see some action from the ram over here, breaking through the... No, we're not. This ram has been destroyed. Alas, the arrow towers from Umbar really helping. Castamir's Rangers just waiting up on the walls as well. So at this point, for the attackers, down here is definitely where they've had the most luck thus far. So they don't really have any siege towers down here though, or anything to take advantage of this, unless they can push their way through the gate while it's still open. Which it looks like they might be able to do. I mean, there are going to be some Narin Aru sentinels waiting for them on the other side, and they have essentially limited themselves to only one choke point. It looks as though Gondor actually don't want none of that. They don't really want to stay in range of these arrow towers for too long if they can help it. Pelagia Marines taking some volleys from the Castamir's Rangers there. You can also see elsewhere on the walls more engagements are cropping up, although it is between civilians and Balagai Archers, so a real wet noodle fight there, and the civilians are also going to be completely surrounded now by more footmen. So Umbar using their units, which maybe are not quite so powerful in melee, to deal with the Gondorian fodder. So good use of units here, rationing their stronger units for later, although there wasn't much holding back when they sallied out, but that's another matter entirely. We'll see how the battle develops with that in mind. Balagai footmen still pushing hard, but now with some Axemen of Lasarnak on the front lines, you would imagine that this is probably going to start to, as well as some standard Ramazak or garrison, I think. Interesting as this continues, we've also got a hole, which is going to be made by Tundra's Fox over here, giving him another way into the settlement. That wasn't Tundra's Fox, actually, that was from the other side of the settlement. So another way into the settlement now for Tundra's Fox, who is really the only one who has made any inroads into the settlement so far from the attackers.
We must repel the invaders.
Well, I say that. Well, yeah, this is still Tundra's Fox's army, really. You can see WK also pushing into this little alcove. Civilians up here, but again, the forces that WK has committed forward are very unlikely to do much at all against these elite Umbar forces. I mean, Ramazak or Garrison, as far as militia goes, they can do pretty well in an infantry fight, but not against Harbingers and Castamir's Legion. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the settlement, we can see over here as well, looks like another sally out from Umbar. indeed. Although this one, it's a little less risky. You can see here the Corsair Savages really just chasing off a bunch of civilians. What are the Corsair Savages going to do from here, though, I wonder? And there are forces over here which Umbar have essentially got in reserve at this point, because no attackers are going to be attacking from this angle anymore. Master Blaster fully shifted his army over to help WK out. And I'm not sure I agree with that per se. I think one of the real weaknesses of this settlement from a defending point of view is the fact that if the attackers spread themselves out enough, it would be really... Oh, that was a nice hit from the Trebuchet there, though. Right into the gut of those Corsair pikemen. But as I was saying, if you spread yourselves out all along the walls, it could be quite difficult for the defenders to cover every angle. Whereas if you just sort of limit yourselves to a few avenues of attack, yes, you'll be able to commit your forces in a more condensed fashion. So you'll have, obviously, more strength in a more focused area, but that also allows the defenders to do the same. And 9 times out of 10, the defenders are going to have more quality than the attackers, although in this situation, in an RP, that is a little less clear. So we'll see. Meanwhile, this is continuing over here. We can see the Ramasek or Garrison are up on the wall, sort of waiting to jump in. But again, Umbar's defensive forces are holding firm here. Not really the easiest way in. The Trebuchet bombardment continues, trying to go for the blobs. Still those 2 Trebuchets again. I don't think they've got anything in the way of defences over here. You'd have thought that the defenders, the attackers I should say, would have left something over here to guard them against this sort of thing. But once again, this time there's going to be no saving these Trebuchets, because Cannon Fodder's Corsair Savages are on the way to ruin their lives. And Trebuchet crewmen are going to be no match for a bunch of hooligans wielding oversized axes. Those civilians came back, but the civilians are not really the reinforcements they were looking for. Well, what's going on over here? Just a bunch of Gondorian reserves just waiting, but they're in full view of the arrow towers once again. The arrow towers proving themselves to be very useful here, a very useful component of the Umbar defence. More frame drops, lovely. Citadel Guard being pushed in by Kuro at this point. AP spears being used to deal with Corsairs. I feel as though a lower tier unit could have done this job just as well. Then again, the Corsair Savages are unlikely to enjoy fighting the Citadel Guard too much, but they're going to need help here. They're going to need more infantry committed forwards. So far, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. That sally out from Umbar didn't go fully as they were intending, I'm sure. But ever since then, Umbar have been having the better of pretty much every engagement we've seen. We can now see, however, that WK is getting a little bit more serious. He's trying to push into the town centre, put a lot more pressure on Umbar. Now, I will have to zoom out of these larger blob fights, because with the density of all these Castamir's Rangers, zooming in on them while they're shooting into a blob is a surefire way to crash the game, as I have learned. Axeman of Lasarnak moving in. But if we just look from on high over here, you can see that this choke point over here is being held up very well by Corsair Pikemen and Abrazanim and Corsairs. So at this point, I think Master Blaster is... Well, he definitely needs to commit more of his forces forward. You can see that WK's forces are already starting to rout in places. I feel as though the attackers need to really take the bull by the horns here. And over here they are. In this little alcove, you can see that Sin's elite units have been overwhelmed. So this concentration of force from Gondor has allowed them a bit of an in into the settlement over here. And ironically, over by the town centre seems to be where they're having the most luck. As the frames continue to just... Oh my word, that was a truly horrendous hit there from Engsvitz's catapult. Obviously a huge concentration of forces over here. This has devolved into a lot of blob fights, so we're going to be viewing it from on high, just so that it doesn't crash. That was actually some friendly fire there, unfortunate, but this is the problem for Gondor. They've formed some blobs.
They have lost half their men.
And considering their trebuchets are not in a position to take advantage of this, really, the Umbar catapults will certainly oblige. Meanwhile, let's go and just have a quick look at what's going on down here. Yeah, and you can see the trebuchets being destroyed by the Corsair Savages doing their grisly work. So that's 2 trebuchets down, as the frame rate continues to be horrified at what's happening. These are big sieges now. It can be real difficult to make these run smoothly. But from on high you can see that Gondor's still struggling, and primarily this is going to be because of the ranged firepower of Umbar and the catapult doing huge damage to these blob, because again, the Gondorian infantry quality is good. They've got Carandros Swordmasters, they've got Guards of Osgiliath, Citadel Guard were in there at one point, although I can't imagine they're looking too healthy at this point, and there's going to be routing going on now. The lower tier of Gondor's forces not really built to take this sort of punishment.
Only half the enemy force remains.
And very quickly this is going to be sorted out. Over here, however, Gondor are pushing back. You can see that they took that alcove and now they've pushed in. Umbar have formed a defensive line, however, and this does include Narun Aru Sentinels, Castamir's Legion. The Corsair Blackguards are firing in. Again, keeping track of all of Umbar's skirmishers in this situation is going to be impossible, but they do have rangers, they have javelins, they have crossbows, they have all of the good stuff, as well as a very strong front line. Gondor, by contrast, have got their Fountain Guard, however, and a lot of very strong infantry of their own. They also have their own javelins. The Pelargir Marines are not quite as good as the Corsair Blackguards in melee when it comes down to it, but their javelins will still be very useful to peel away the Umbar defenders. Meanwhile, over here you can see that this Gondorian attack has been just halted by the Umbar defence. There's a real concentration of force over here. This fight so far has been the definition of blob fights. And I think that that's kind of how it had to go based on how the attackers decided to approach this. Again, maybe spreading out wouldn't have been the best thing for them, because wherever their lower tier units were, they probably would have lost. But as it is, I think, you know, blobbing up hasn't really served them too well thus far either. The Ramazekal garrison not really enjoying that. You can see that Gondor have actually been fully forced out of the settlement over here, both on the walls and at ground level. And basically all of the resources from both the attackers and the defenders have been evacuated from this portion of the city. The south gate and the east gate were not attacked really at all by the attackers. Meanwhile, the north and west walls saw all of the action pretty much, which has allowed Umbar to concentrate their forces, and with their quality, I would imagine that at some point very soon Gondor are probably going to run out of steam. You can see here that the Trebuchet from WK is trying to do what the Umbar catapults are doing to the Gondorian attackers, but they don't really have the best angle. They're having to try and thread the needle through the gaps. If they were able to get their Trebuchet into the settlement, it would be a different matter, but look at that. I mean, the Umbar catapults have been so devastating to the Gondorians so far. We do have another wave coming up, however. Master Blaster's army has run all the way around the settlement at this point, and is now trying to push in here. Citadel Guard, as well as some spearmen in there. And a thin line of Nardu Tariq are not going to be enough. Some Narun Aru Sentinels are fighting against something that has pushed through. Whatever it is, though, it failed miserably to gain any traction, and now it's turned into essentially a fight for a few choke points, which Umbar are probably going to enjoy this much more than Gondor. Engsvitz's catapult is waiting there, so as soon as Master Blaster does push through the Nardu Tariq, his only reward will be a face full of artillery fire, once again, just like Tundra's Fox had to suffer. The Gondorian infantry is pushing, though. It's worth saying that, you know, ground is being made by this Gondor infantry. And in general, obviously, the infantry is where Gondor's main strengths lie. Even the Narun Aru Sentinels are starting to struggle in the face of this sustained pressure, to the point where skirmishers are now being committed to the front line. But again, that continual catapult fire.
Only half the enemy force remains.
Another nice hit there. And I just don't think Gondor can take too much more of this beating. Again, more halberds are coming forward, and this is the issue. All of these forces which were deployed around the settlement are just going to be able to funnel in. Wherever there's a gap, they'll be able to commit another unit of halberds or pikes or even Castamir's Legion. Bad tidings for them. Meanwhile, over here, it can be a little bit difficult to tell, I know, but if I get too close, we're doomed to crash. So those are crossbow bolts, you can tell from the sound effect, and obviously crossbows are going to be like kryptonite to all of this heavily armoured Gondorian infantry, and also they're taking point-blank fire from the Blackguards. More crossbow bolts coming in. Again, this is a lot of Gondor infantry that Umbar are having to wade through. And Umbar did commit a lot into their skirmishers, so it's possible, eventually, that... oh, hello. That was some unfortunate point-blank friendly fire into his own crossbow corsairs there. He's going for the trebuchet at this point. Tundra's Fox trying to use his trebuchet at point-blank range in a similar manner, but again, the terrain is in favour of Umbar here. The trebuchet does not have an easy shot. The catapult, meanwhile, will try and counter-snipe, which, when it comes down to a battle of accuracy, the catapult is easily going to win that. Let's have a look at the percentages, actually. When I say that, the trebuchet just sniped out a catapult, but you can see that Umbar certainly in the ascendancy so far. Again, it is possible that when they run out of dedicated infantry and they only have skirmishers left, that they'll start to struggle a little bit more. This Gondorian push has not really moved too far since last we saw it, and I think a lot of the elites have probably run out of steam at this point. There's Guards of Osgiliath, Axemen, Pelagia Marines still firing their javelins, but they're getting absolutely hammered by all of the Umbar skirmishers. That there is another hit on the catapult from the trebuchet, so it goes to show what I know. I suppose the trebuchet's got an easier shot on the catapult than it does on the Umbar infantry. But once again, the manner of this engagement for Gondor is so punishing. Gondor's infantry is really, really durable. But in this situation, they're being asked to deal with body-piercing ranger projectiles, javelins, crossbow bolts, strong infantry and melee, whilst being sort of wrapped around. They're having to go into the sort of... I've always mentioned the crescent moon formation. If you're on the inside of it, it's always going to be bad for you. Gondor have had to deal with loads of that in this fight so far. They're going to have another crack at trying to clear off the walls. Now, the Wardens of the White Tower will certainly do that against the Balagaya footman. There goes one of the Gondor generals in that blob. The blob of doom. It's hard to tell where the living soldiers are and where the dead bodies are. Some more Gondor infantry being committed. I mean, you can see that the Umbar front line is actually pretty thin on the ground at this point. That's another nice hit from the catapult. Morale will almost certainly start to be an issue for Gondor here, though. Also, our Blackguards coming in, not half bad in melee. There's the trebuchet. Looks like it got a decent hit as well. Still just more arrows just flying all over the place. What's going on over here? There's still a fight going on the wall over here. There's a burning trebuchet outside. Still, we can see some Karandros swordmasters. They're shaken. And I think that's a result of the arrow tower doing continual damage to them. And that's going to be enough to give the Balagaya Archers the win, actually. That burning trebuchet out in the background. But honestly, this fight's a bit of a footnote at this point.
Wise to praise the day before sunset, but our men are winning the battle and forging a worthy victory.
Yeah, I don't really see how Gondor are going to reverse this situation at this point. They tried to sort of consolidate their forces into
Lord preserve us. We have lost half of our
very
men.
specific avenues of attack, and I don't think it's worked out for them all that well. Here we can see some Axemen of Lasana trying to get up onto the walls, but it might already be too late, to be honest with you. They will win over here against the Balagaya footmen, even with the arrow towers doing some damage. Yeah, you can see here that the Gondorian assault has essentially fallen apart. This choke point over here is still being assaulted by Axemen and by Fountain Guard, actually. But there's still catapults. Umbar still have reserves as well. Nadu Tariq and Casimir's Legion just sort of waiting. Narun Arurul Guard in position, shooting at the Axemen, actually. They could yet finish off those Axemen before the Balagaya Archers are killed. The settlement has seen better days at this point. The castle is has got a few holes in it. Some of the buildings are ablaze. Several of the towers have been destroyed and the walls are down. Again, the crossbow corsairs have almost certainly been one of the things which Gondor have really struggled with in this battle. They're so devastating, and Gondor really haven't been able to get an archer unit in position to effectively answer them. Their primary weakness, of course, is range fire.
Victory will be ours.
But as it is, Gondor really haven't been able to force their way into the settlement too far. Over here, Tundra's Fox has really been trying, but he's not really made any significant ground. Over here was where Gondor managed to get furthest in. They kind of made it just almost to the TC. but it wouldn't really have mattered anyway. It cost them so much to do that, and the catapults, the Umbar catapults in particular, have been so devastating. The Fountain Guard are shaken.
The enemy have ladders at the walls. Repel the attackers. Give them steel.
The crossbow Corsairs in position. They're going to have to deal with some Ramazek Garrison Archers again. A wet noodle fight. Still the Axemen of the Sarnak taking a beating from the arrow towers and well, not the Royal Guard anymore. I think they're out of ammunition. There goes another general. Slain by a Black Guard. Fountain Guard are still fighting hard on the front line over here, to be fair to them. Up against Balagai Halberds, and they will win that. But there's too many Umbar forces left for Gondor to make any substantial comeback at this point, I think.
Battle is in our favour. If we remain true and wholehearted, victory will be ours.
Gondorian Trebuchet doing its best. You can see up here, Gondorians trying to make inroads up on the walls, but once again the Corsair crossbows just focusing their fire up there, and the Wardens of the White Tower not enjoying all of this range pressure they're receiving. They're so durable, but under sustained body piercing and armor piercing projectile fire, even they will not last. Oof. Trebuchet being destroyed there. A Trebuchet's been remanned, actually. Down there from Master Blaster. His armies have been running around the battlefield all over the place outside the settlement, but unfortunately for him, none of his troops have really managed to do the business where it counts, and that's inside the settlement. Balagar Archers still fighting against the Axemen of the Sarnak, who are actually shaken at this point, so no rest for the weary from a Gondorian perspective. What have we here? The Ramazek Garrison Archers actually broke and are now fighting to the death. Again, they were very depleted when they went up there, so it's unsurprising that their morale was suffering. There's Harbingers of Castamere now on the front line, but even they will struggle against the Fountain Guard, and actually the Fountain Guards still look like they're going to achieve victory over here. Umbar have managed to reclaim that little side area over there. Some Athelian Rangers were a part of the Gondorian attacking force, but I'm not really sure how many kills they got. Obviously not enough, because it wasn't enough for them to win this absolute massacre over here. The frame rate drops whenever I even look at the dead bodies at this point. A fight between Rangers there. Athelian and Castameres, both caked in that low-res snow. Some Ramazek Garrison Archers just outside the walls. But you know, this is... You can tell that things are going against the attackers at this point, because Umbar once again feeling confident enough to take the fight to them outside the walls. The Narduzagar facing the Axemen of the Sarnak. I imagine they were trying to surround the Fountain Guard, but they were intercepted. Not that it matters too much, because there's some crossbow Corsairs which are going to shoot point blank into them, and those Fountain Guardsmen are also going to be completely overwhelmed at some point. Those Axemen are routing. The spirit of this Gondorian army is starting to break. There's some Nimlothian Honor Guard here on the front line, but defeat seems certain even for them. The Narun Aru Sentinels proving to be, again, a very good anchor. Catapult falling by the wayside there. These Balagai Archers are not going to enjoy this fight too much. Then again, the Kaer-Andros Swordmasters will certainly not enjoy that. That was instantly routed by the catapult there. And they're a good unit as well, so they've got high morale, but the beating that Gondor's army has taken is really taking its toll on the total morale here. Corsair Savages climbing down at this point, probably going to go after Master Blaster's Trebuchet just to try and finish it off. Corsair Blackguards reloading, getting into a nice position to throw their javelins into the side of this Gondor infantry blob. That was a nice hit though, coming in from the Trebuchet. It's a long way off, but even if they did break through at this point, Umbar have got enough left to stop them. Umbar's army, to be fair, it's taken a fair share of it's taken a beating. More than 3/4 of the total Umbar forces have been destroyed, but the wounds that Gondor have suffered have just been far greater as this battle has gone on. And you can see the Fountain Guard were indeed overwhelmed and surrounded. Victory for Umbar over here, so this is going to mark really the end of the Gondorian assault over here. There's still a few units running around. There's a couple of Athelian Rangers over there, though that unit of Ramazek Garrison Archers is going to make a nuisance of itself, but very little else. not much more it can do.
We are blessed.
There goes another
The
general.
enemy general is dead. We have set the enemy. It is unwise to praise the day before sunset, but our men are winning the battle and forging a worthy victory.
If you'll notice as well, none of the Umbar generals have died, and this is because they were in Naru Royal Guard, so they were skirmishers and largely kept out of the fight. They're obviously being committed now, later on, but the Gondorian generals have been falling throughout the battle as a result of them having to be committed to fights where Gondor were really struggling, and obviously it cost them their lives. Trying to destroy that catapult. The Umbar catapults in particular, very well used, very well positioned. Tons of damage to Gondor, not just in terms of kills, but also the morale damage they did. Several units broke. We saw those Care Andros Swordmasters even broke in the face of the catapult.
The enemy flees the battle. Run down those worthless peasants.
I mean, to be fair, there's Fountain Guard and Nimlothian Honor Guard over here. They will be pretty difficult to dislodge, but it's only a matter of time before Umbar just overwhelm them. Meanwhile, that's going to be the end of the trebuchets. Finally, after 3 different attempts to fully destroy the 2 trebuchets that were down here, Umbar finally has them dealt with. And I feared the worst for the Umbar defence actually after that initial sally out, which didn't quite work out as well as they were hoping. But ever since then, Gondor really struggled to gain any sort of traction in this fight. Again, I feel as though, based on the resources they had, they probably couldn't have spread out all along the walls, but I feel as though they probably should have chosen 2 more avenues of attack than just this corner over here and this wall. It allowed Umbar to concentrate their forces so much. If you were going to take just 2 entries in, they should have gone for this one and then one on the other side of the settlement as well, just to try and split Umbar up a little bit. As it was, all they really needed to do was focus around the town centre, and they could reinforce where they chose pretty readily. All their units were on hand when they needed them. Crossbow Corsairs are fighting. I mean, at this point we're in the winding down phase of the battle. Really the only major battle going on at this point is over here. The Nimlothian Honor Guard showing their strength once more. There's still that Gondorian trebuchet swivelling around in there. But you would imagine that there's only so much that these Gondorian units are going to be capable of at this point in time. They might be able to bring the percentages a little bit closer, but really little else. You can see over there some Garrison Archers creeping up on them from behind. What are they going to go for? Are they going to go for the trebuchet crew? I assume they are. There's only 5 of them left. And that'll be the end of the Gondorian artillery. The Naru Royal Guard are climbing down, so that's going to be another multiple HP unit attacking them from the rear. And the encirclement is complete. Let's go and see what happens to that one unit of Ramasek or Garrison. There's some Axemen of Lasarnak over here, trying to give them a hand. There's actually some Harbingers over here who are going to get overwhelmed. But once again, out amidst the very low-res trees.
Has lost his stomach to fight. We must push our advantage.
This is going to be the end of this little force.
The day before sunset, but our men are winning the battle and forging a worthy victory.
I mean, the settlement at this point has certainly seen better days. Several holes in the wall, several of the towers down.
We are blessed. The enemy general is dead.
That's the final Gondorian general. Oh, spin to win. I do wonder if... I mean, there's no way to actually simulate this in Medieval 2. You can't have a damaged settlement from the get-go like you can in Attila. But I'd be interested to know if they had to pay to fix their settlement in any way, if there was sort of mandatory costs involved with that. I mean, even so, that would be cold comfort for Gondor here, because they have lost, and I don't know, I think Umbar will be relatively pleased with how much they have left, to be honest with you. It's still relatively close, but considering the start to this battle and how touch and go it could have been for a while, as the battle developed, I'm pretty sure that Umbar will be quite pleased with this. Another unit of Naru Royal Guard being committed forwards. Engsvince's catapult maybe getting into position for another bombardment, although at this point He would likely get friendly fire as well, so... Well, there go, the Carantral Swordmass is broken, so it might be just worth his time, honestly. To not shoot, preserve the lives of more of his own men. In an RP series like this, that's going to be a little bit more important than it is in just a one-off battle. Only at this point did that guy realise that they were under attack. Still crossbow bolts flowing into the Gondorians. This, I believe, is going to be the last engagement. Still a little something going on out here. Oh, no, there isn't. The Ramasek or Garrison Archers literally just broke. The Axemen of Lasarnak are back, although they're wavering, so they're going to break pretty much instantly when they connect with the Umbar infantry, who are feeling very confident about their chances at this point. Naruna Irish Sentinels again proving themselves to be a pretty terrific unit. They're shaken. They're going to get their charge off. No, they're not going to last too long here. They're exhausted. Yeah, they broke. So now, the final battle over here, although it's not much of a battle at this point. I think it's only really the Nimlothian Honor Guard which are hidden in there somewhere. Engsmith is going to try and shoot from afar, but at this point he would certainly get a huge amount of friendly fire. And there we go. Victory for them, and that should be just about it. So we've got up to 2 speed. I can't imagine there's really much of anything else. Yeah, they're routing, so they're not going to come back. Just wondering what Gondor actually have left. Do they have units like on the outside of the settlement over here? Yeah, they have a trebuchet crew, but I imagine they're going to make Master Blast to admit defeat at this point. There's nothing that 7 trebuchet crewmen are going to be able to do in this sort of situation, so looking over the carnage, you can see that there were 2 very distinct action areas on this battlefield today. The early sally out was an interesting point, but other than that, we saw the dangers of really trying to condense your forces too much, I think, especially when you're facing off against a force which has got the range power that Umbar were displaying here. You know, Umbar had access to javelins, artillery, crossbows, rangers, a lot of standard archers as well, and they were really allowed to use pretty much all of those things to really good effect by Gondor blobbing up. I don't know whether there was much else Gondor could have done given their compositions, but at the very least they could have split the 2 areas they were attacking from a little bit more, because as it was, they were far too close together and it allowed Umbar to consolidate their forces even more, allowing them to reinforce where necessary. But yeah, that's going to be the end of the fight.
This is a clear victory that goes to only men of great virtue and valor.
Indeed. So well played to Umbar. A victory for them over Gondor. Engsmith's getting by far and away the most kills in this battle, and I imagine that's down to his very well positioned crossbow corsairs shooting things up on the walls, and also his catapult and rangers getting very, very nice shots into a very dense blob, whereas the other blob that formed near the town centre was a little bit wider, so a little bit more difficult maybe to get kills off on that. As for the attackers, mixed fortunes. I mean, WK got the least amount of kills, but that doesn't surprise me too much because he was the first one into the most well-defended portion of the settlement. The most kills went to Kuro. Again, he was involved in the action from the get-go, in that initial sally out, right through towards the end. So yeah. Meanwhile, let's see what did the damage. Obviously, the catapult getting a huge amount of kills, as did the crossbow corsairs. Naruna Rogal actually not getting a huge amount of kills, which is surprising considering he got presumably so many. A unit Balagai Footman was the MVP for this, and that really says quite a lot. I mean, if you're feeding 446 kills to a unit of Balagai Footman, a spearman unit with a malice, and I think only a total attack of 3, that means you're presenting them with targets that you really shouldn't be, and I think that kind of comes down to them putting their Ramasek or Garrison Archers in harm's way far, far too much to the attackers. Meanwhile, Sin of the Dark Cloud, his MVP, was a unit of crossbow corsairs, unsurprising there with 330. Definitely the crossbows in general doing a lot of the damage there. Actually, what did his Rangers do? Only 204. That's fairly tame for Rangers, to be honest. Down here, we can see 300, which is much more like it from, I think this is Eclipse's army? Nope, Cannon Fodder. So also his crossbow's doing very well. So yeah, the crossbow Corsairs in general, I think, can take home the title of MVPs across the board. Yeah, nearly 300 on this unit here, just shy of 250 there, and then the Castamir's Rangers also getting 343 as well. So yeah, the ranged power was really what won Umbar this fight, and I feel as though Gondor's style of attack probably made that a little bit easier for them, based on the fact they consolidated their forces so much, and they were trying to push through. You could tell, trying to sort of condense their quality, use the Fountain Guard, and make it so that it's really difficult to defend against Gondor's quality in melee. But in the end, Umbar won the battle simply by shooting them to death. And yeah, I think it was a good fight though. I mean, Gondor were not too far away. Again, I still feel as though with a few slight tweaks they could have made a little bit more of a fist of this one. But yeah, so that is another battle from the RP. I assume that I will be able to show more of these in the future, at least I hope so. They are a little bit more... You can see evidence of them being a little bit more tactical, with people trying to consolidate things, people bearing in mind the fact that future battles are going to be affected by this one, rather than just one-offs, which tend to be, you know, people don't really need to care about what happens after. They can just sort of commit forward everything very, very aggressively and not really worry too much about it. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.